Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to It's Rainmaking Time. This is Kim Greenhouse. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Chuck Waterfield to the show today. He is an expert in microfinance and has been in microfinance for over 25 years. Now, I became interested in microfinance when I first found out about the work of Dr. Mohammed Yunus of the Grameen Bank. I became fascinated with that model, and in 2003, pre-Nobel Prize, I interviewed Dr. Mohammed Yunus for an hour. Now, at that time, I want you all to know I wasn't on the air, I wasn't an official broadcaster, and Dr. Yunus took my call. It was a beautiful interview, and one of the many things I learned was that the interest rate at that time to the borrowers was 14%. I didn't understand why it was 14%, and actually talking about interest rates could be many, many hours on the phone. I don't know if the listeners know, but Dr. Mohammed Yunus was removed from the Grameen Bank. One of the arguments is the interest rates. But I have called in Chuck Waterfield today because he is an expert in microfinance, and he started microfinance institutions in Haiti and Bolivia in the 1980s and 90s. He was also the microfinance director for MEDA and CARE International. He is very well known for a planning software that he developed called Microfin, which is a standard planning software used worldwide in microfinance. He is also on the board of Columbia University in the international affairs area. He's going to talk to us today about the inside of microfinance, about interest rates. So it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome Chuck Waterfield to It's Rainmaking Time this morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Kim.
I first heard about you from the Grameen Foundation. I was on a teleconference call a few weeks ago, and your name was mentioned as one of the few people who really has checked into the question of interest rates, understands it in a microfinance context. And I thought we should open talking about that because now I know that the interest rate for Grameen at least is 20%. And some people have a major issue with it. Talk to us.
Wow. Okay. We're going to dive right into the most, one of the most important and probably the most confusing areas of all of microfinance, and that is the price that we charge to the poor. Dr. Yunus and I had a very fundamental key meeting on that very point almost exactly 3 years ago, April of 2008, where I proposed that we start a global organization that collects, calculates, and publishes the true prices we're charging in microloans around the world. We had his full support on that, and I'm currently the CEO of an organization called Microfinance Transparency, and we are working in over 20 countries around the world right now collecting the true prices. So, for example, when you say Grameen is charging 20%, that's data that we've collected and calculated and published on our website. Until we did that, nobody really knew for sure what the price was that even Grameen was charging. So it's very important, again, I think philosophically and ethically, that we communicate true prices. I live in the United States, and we, for over 40 years, have had protection through an act that was called the Truth in Lending Law, and that requires anyone lending us money at the time, at least at the time of signing the contract, to tell us the true price, calculated as an APR, an annual percentage rate. So there's lots of ways that finance institutions around the world, and certainly not just microfinance, we borrowed all of this, but there's certainly ways that you can make a product, a loan, look cheaper than it is, and it's only through truth in lending conversions to transparent pricing or true pricing that the consumer can really compare and contrast different loan products that they're being sold and determine what the true price is.
When you talk about the true prices, I'm confused.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah, this is I would say sadly, I think that understanding the price of a loan is one of the most confusing things. We're consumers. We buy lots and lots of things. We go in and we buy a cup of coffee from a coffee shop. We go buy lunch. We go buy, some consumer goods, and we see the price, and we know exactly the price. That the price is transparent, and that we know we get a good, and we give an amount of money in return. Now, we assume that buying a loan is the same thing, and we assume that when we're told an interest rate, that's something of a comparable, that's an accurate measure of the price. It isn't. Again, Microfinance didn't invent any of this, but there's different ways of calculating interest rates. There are very common to put additional fees, like an initiation fee at the beginning. So we can say, well, we're loaning you, $100, but we take out 2% as a initiation fee, and then we charge you an interest rate of, let's say, well, you were using Bangladesh figures. Let's say we're using an interest rate of 12%. Okay. Now, I, the consumer, then think, well, okay, 2% and 12%, and I try to figure out how to combine that into one. What's the total price? Okay. That's what an APR actually does. It combines two or more numbers, cost components, into the equivalent of a declining balance interest rate. And I need to stress the concept of declining balance because many places around the world, microfinance loans are not, the interest rate is not even calculated on a declining balance. In the United States, or most commercial finance around the world, the interest rate is calculated on the balance you still owe. And that's logical, that's textbook. Very common in microfinance is to charge what we call a flat interest rate. And I'll give you a few seconds on this because it's very fundamental. Like, let's say that Bangladesh institution says we charge you 12% a year, but it's flat. Okay, what that means is I'm loaning you $100. Let's say it's for a year, but as you pay back the $100 every week or every month, I am still charging you interest on the original $100, even though you owe me considerably less. So I'm charging you interest on money you no longer have. That results in a higher interest payment, and when you convert that into a declining balance interest rate, it's almost double.
So the devil's in the details, right, Chuck?
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of, and again, lenders, marketers of lending products figured out a long time ago, many years ago, that people want to know what the interest rate is. So across the street, they're saying 20%. Okay, 20%, and they're calculating declining balance. Like, well, in fact, guess what? I'm giving you real Grameen numbers. Grameen charges 20% declining balance. Okay, and across the street from Grameen, any of the more than 100, every single other MFI in Bangladesh that's of any scale at all, over 100, are all universally charging flat interest, and they would be charging across the street either 12% or 15%. Those are the two common numbers in Bangladesh. You decide, are you going to charge 12 or 15? Grameen charges 20, and everyone else is charging 12 or 15, so it looks like Grameen's more expensive. But dig into the details. A 12% flat rate, you're double charging. It's almost double. The real APR, when you run that through a calculator, is almost double, so it's almost 24%. And the 15% rate is almost 30%. So you have three institutions, one saying, we have the low price of 12, another one say, we have the common price of 15, and poor Grameen is charging 20. But the true price, the transparent price, the truth in lending, the APR, whatever you want to call it, is really Grameen's the lowest with 20, and then you have 24, and then you have 30. Okay?
Very clear.
Yeah.
Very clear, and the devil really is in the details because the deception is a contractual one. The borrower doesn't know. I bet each borrower was never explained these distinctions when they went to the 12 and 15% flat rate, thinking it's lower.
Right. And here's this is actually, again, sort of it's